Hello and welcome to my dungeon. Today I want to show you the Mothership Sci-Fi RPG. In this Game Master's perspective, I will tell you what this game is about, show you my highlights, what I really like about this game, and finally tell you who I think this game is for and what other books and RPG stuff you could use together with this game. So, if that interests you, consider liking the video down below and subscribing to my channel. There's a lot more where this video came from. And let's get started. So, who is this game for? This is for people who like classic sci-fi horror and horror movies, like Alien, for example, always the prime example, or Event Horizon, or even 2001 A Space Odyssey. But you don't necessarily want to play in just one of these universes, play in this one franchise, but want to do your own thing. You're looking for something more general. And you also prefer one-shots to lead horror one-shots, or lose a lot of characters throughout a campaign because this game is pretty deadly. And for those type of games, it's a very good rule set. Character generation is super fast, yet gives you interesting characters to play with. The rules are very easy to grasp and never get in the way of the narrative, never take too much of your GM headspace, so you can focus on the atmosphere and the horror. And it's also a pretty generalized rule set. While it has this kind of 80s used future like feel, it's not super specific with its background and classes and abilities and equipment, not like Death in Space or the Alien RPG. So this will fit through a variety of settings. To show off the rules and my highlights, I'll use the PDFs for better readability. Let me briefly go over the rules. They're not that complicated. And I will explain them using this handy character sheet that you can give to your players for very easy character generation. Start. Roll 2d10 plus 24 for each stat. So you've got just 4 attributes. It's a D%, a D100 roll under system. You also have saves, sanity, fear, and body when something really bad happens to you, which happens a lot. Then you select one of 4 classes: Marine, Android, Scientist, and the Teamster, your standard sci-fi crew composition, you might say. And these give you some modifiers, and more importantly, they come with a number of skills. Skills give you, when applicable, a bonus of 10, 15, or 20 on your stat rolls. Expert and master skills are more narrow, more specialized than the trained skills and the expert skills, so we'll get this bigger bonus on fewer occasions. Also, there's a bit of a Trilski. For the expert skills and the master skills, you need to be trained in the skills before them. So if you want sophontology, you have to be trained in psychology. And to be an expert in psychology, you either need linguistics or zoology. Another example, if you want to be master of command, you need to be trained in either piloting or firearms, and for firearms you need either military training or rimwise. You start with a number of these skills, and then during the game you will likely not get XP and train any more skills, because your character will most likely die in their first adventure. this is perhaps the most deadly game that I've played other than basic D&D, which is very much thematic for sci-fi horror. In sci-fi horror, from the crew usually only one member survives, which was my experience with the last adventure we played. If you do survive, you train these skills in the off time, and it takes time, like 1 year, 2 years, and money, like 10,000 credits. It's expensive and time consuming to get more trained, expert or master skills. But if you are running a long form campaign, it is possible to improve your character. So then you roll 1d10 plus 10 for your health. Damage first goes into your armor points, and only if the damage from a single attack surpasses your armor, then the remaining damage goes onto your health, and also your armor breaks and no longer works. So the next time you take damage, it will go directly to your health. But as long as you still have health points, no biggie. But if you go to 0 or below 0, you gain a wound. And a wound has real deadly consequences. You or the GM roll on this here handy table with a d10 and then the type of wound your character has suffered. And if you get a bleeding wound from a knife, maybe you just drop a handheld item, or you get lacerations with bleeding and take damage every round until treated, or throat slit or heart pierce, death save. Your character can take a number of wounds before they go into a death save. So for the base characters, that's 2 wounds. When you suffer your second wound, roll on the wound table, why not, and then roll on the death save, which is a pretty nifty mechanic. The GM rolls a d10 and places a cup over it, so no one actually knows what the condition of the character is until someone goes and checks on the character. Then you reveal the result. So maybe you're just unconscious. Maybe you're unconscious and dying, and someone should really treat the wounds. Maybe in a coma or straight up dead. Then we have a stress mechanic. You start with 2 stress, and whenever you fail a stat check or a save, one of the usual bad consequences that happen is that you gain stress. And when something really upsetting happens, you make a panic check. Meaning you roll with a d20, and if you roll under your current stress level, you panic. And you can take the very same roll and look up the panic effect. So if you roll really low, it might even be beneficial. Adrenaline rush. Advantage, that's noted by this plus, on all rolls for the next 2d10 minutes. Reduce stress by 1d5. So especially if your stress is very low, there might be beneficial consequences of a panic effect. But it's more likely that it's not good. Nervous, gain 1 stress. Frightened, gain a new condition. When encountering what frightened you, make a fear save or gain even more stress. Death wish. For the next 24 hours, whenever encountering a stranger or known enemy, make a sanity save or immediately attack them. The stress mechanic is a self-reinforcing cycle of doom. When you get more stress, it's easier to fall in panic. When you get in panic effects, it's likely to get more stressful, and more often you will panic, which is very much in theme with sci-fi horror and makes the situation more desperate and more tense as the adventure continues. Pretty good mechanic. This is definitely one of my highlights for the system, and this very mechanic is super easy to port into other systems, like Call of Cthulhu, for example, if you don't want to use the sanity mechanic of the base game. You get trauma response corresponding to your class and equipment. and we've got some cool equipment. Highlight here is definitely this picture of the different types of armor with explanations of what everything is, where it might be, and what it might look like. Got a number of sci-fi firearms and more likely even industrial equipment that you will be abusing as weapons. And most notably here I find is the laser cutter, which does 1d100 damage. This thing just cuts people and monsters apart. It is a nasty piece of work. Character creation, you just roll for a loadout, which gives you a set of starting gear, which might be good, or maybe pretty bad, like tank top, camo pants, combat knives, and stim packs and nothing else. And the rest of the gear you have to acquire during the game. You also roll on a random trinket, which might be a key to your childhood home, maybe a coffee cup, chipped that reads happiness is mandatory, something personal to your character, and you also get a patch somewhere on your armor, on your uniform, that might be nomad or all-seeing eye or foobar, and these two things add a bit of character to your character. At the beginning this is very superficial characterization, and then during the game you can decide what you make of it and give it more deeper meaning. Why are you carrying that trinket? Why do you have that crew patch? But the very beginning of the game, this is a visual cue for you and the other characters, or for the audience of a movie, to clue them in what the character might be about. For example, if you've got gloves of xenomorph hide leather, then maybe you're a hunter of xenomorphs, or you have a strange obsession of them, possibly. One of my highlights of the rules is actually just a piece of equipment, the stim pack. Cures cryosickness, reduces stress by 1, restores 1d10 health, and grants plus to all rolls for 1d10 minutes. So it's a super powerful healing and buffing item. But roll 1d10. If you roll under the amount of stimpack doses you have taken in the past 24 hours, instantly make a death save. So as the adventure continues, as you need that bonus die to actually make any roll, as you need it to restore some health and you continue abusing stimpaks just to survive, this might be the very thing that kills you, which happened to my last character, and I find that is such a cool and, once again, thematic mechanic for a sci-fi horror RPG. Wonderful item here. In general, your stats, your saves, even with skills, will probably be pretty low, in the 20s, in the 30s if you're lucky, in the 40s or even 50s for your skills. So you will not succeed, at least not without consequences, in most of the checks. But as the game says, this is not the general competence of your character. This is what your character can do on their worst day, when they are under stress, when they are hurt and sick, when they are fighting for their lives. Then this is what is left of their competence. And the game by design requires very few rolls on stats and saves. Combined with a failing forward mechanic and attitude, this usually means that while the action and the story will continue, the status and the situation of your character will become more desperate as the adventure continues and goes towards its grand finale. That's it for the general player's rules. There's a bit more, but those are my highlights. very minimal and intuitive to use system that you can explain to your players in 15 minutes, half an hour while you're making characters. Very good for one shot or just people who don't want to bother with complicated systems and want to focus on character play, story, and of course atmosphere and horror. The second core rulebook, the Warden Operator's Manual, doesn't have so many actual rules in it, but it has a lot of GM advice. Very good GM advice. How to prepare a game. What types of horrors you want. What kind of dangerous situations could possibly be there. How to run puzzles and horror situations. And how to efficiently map out and note down your adventure. And this is one of the most effective mapping methods I have ever seen. You just draw a square for your important plot location, give it a very short description right there, and onto the connection to your next major plot location, you write what the way to there is and maybe how long it will take to get there. So this might be a train ride, 1 hour maglev train ride, or it might be a 200-meter tunnel, might be blocked by a guard, might be a corridor lit by dark candles, might be locked from one side. Whatever it is, note it down right there on your map, and then a more detailed description on the facing side. This is an entire adventure on just 2 pages, and the game tells you exactly how to make this. Very efficient, very useful GM advice right here. And the whole book has advice like that. Very practical, ready to use method and tools that you can implement into your game right away. And it really teaches you how to run these horror games. There's even this tension of a time graph of a typical night of gaming. Food's here, and then all the tension goes down. Where were we? Oh yeah, we are rolling a death save. The monster shows up. It even got a section on making house rules and rulings. Social encounters, violent encounters, running investigations, campaign building, space system building, factions and NPCs. A handy flow chart here for types of adventures and types of horror you might want to use in your game, and a list of recommended media that you can watch or read for inspiration. And in here are, of course, some real classics like Alien from 1979, one of my favorite movies. Event Horizon, which I watched when I was like 12 or 16 maybe, which scared the shit out of me. All Systems Red, a book series by Martha Wells, which I love and was a great inspiration for my own sci-fi writing. And I would definitely add the Dead Space series of video games in here. This system is pretty much perfect to play a game of Dead Space. Just super useful information and advice in general in this short 60-page booklet. And even the back of the booklet, the terms of use, it is called, is like a very short summary of what you should do as a GM. This Warden's Operations Manual is probably the best of the 4 core rulebooks, and I would recommend this to any GM running horror games in general. And you can just buy this on its own. Next up is the Unconfirmed Contact Report, the Monster Manual. And Monster just has this one line of stats and a description, and that's it. We've got your combat stat, the monster rolls on to hit your players, how much damage it does with its weapon and any special effects that might have. Then you've got instinct. Roll on this for anything else that the monster might be doing. Armor points, just like a character's. Wounds, just like a character's, though monsters can have lots of wounds and lots of hit points. Finally, some special abilities, and that's it for stats. Super compact, which also means it's super easy to stat out your own monsters or stat out any monster you've seen in a video game, book or movie. And we've got a good selection of monsters already in here, and some of them are completely left field and not monsters in the strictest of senses. This one is just an algorithm or a computer virus. Angels, the brown stream. There's already a lot in here. You can take any one of this monster for your adventure and build an entire adventure around that monster, and because they are so varied, computer viruses, psychological horrors, demons, biological horrors, aliens, that these adventures will all be very different. This monster manual will keep you entertained for years, I'd say, depending on how often you get to play. And right here at the end we've got 5 quick horrors. These you can use like as the base stats, so you have a guideline, a baseline to make your own monsters with. So this is a pretty cool monster book, and you might want to use just this for inspiration to write your own adventures and in other RPGs. It's that good. Last, we've got the Shipbreaker's Toolkit, which is all about spaceships, vehicles, and space combat, from the modest dropship and your APC, and then you got a number of ships in here. And I really like the design of these ships. They are some of the more realistic sci-fi ship designs that I have seen, like in 2001 Space Odyssey, or the spaceships from Avatar, which are really nice and realistic in their design. We've got a good selection of ships in here with all the extra upgrades and modifications you might do to them, ship weapons, space travel, and combat, spaceship combat, which is very easy and very basic, similar to the base game's combat system, which is also very minimal. And both ship combat and the base game combat is also very deadly, with very dire consequences if you engage in it. This is a horror game. You should try to avoid combat for as long as possible. But that also means that I find these combat rules, especially these space combat rules, aren't all that interesting. And by the nature of the game as a horror game with most likely one-shots or a series of one-shots, this is the least useful of the core rulebooks. Space travel and space combat and all the things that happen in between the adventures is something you are likely to just skip or just narrate and not play out and roll out with the actual rules. So while this core rulebook, the Shipbreaker's Toolkit, is not bad in and of itself, I find from the 4 core rulebooks this is the least useful and one you can do without if you don't want to focus on space travel in your game and are just playing these contained one-shots on the spaceship or on the space station or on the planet and don't play out the travel in between all of that. I'll leave drive-through affiliate links for all of these books and like the compilation of all of these books down in the video description below. Follow them if you like to support my channel and my creative work. The little bit of money I get from that I will put into more cool RPG stuff. Now I've gotten the Deluxe version box for this game because it looked really nice, and it's really nice box that comes with maps and paper cutouts that sadly only have one monster really. Could use a bit more monsters. GM screen with all your useful stuff in here. And in here you have a compartment with a magnet holding it closed, and a box for something, for cards. You can put the paper cutouts in here. Here in the middle you've got room for a few adventures and all your core rule books. And in this other compartment you've got the standees for the paper cutouts and dice. So this is a really nice boxed set, but as nice as it is, I have to say you really don't need this. Just get these 3 booklets here. And since these 3 are just staple bound booklets, it's totally legitimate to get the PDF, print it out yourself, staple bind it yourself. I've got a video on how to do that, or just get the PDF. It will serve you well. Finally, what other books to use this with? There's tons of third-party Mothership designs and rule expansions, settings, and especially adventures, short adventures, leaflet adventures, one-shots, already out, already made by the community. So you won't run out of material anytime soon. Any kind of sci-fi monster manual you can use for inspiration and just stat the monsters for Mothership. They basically only have 2 stats, so it's super simple. And to create more adventures, any kind of book that gives you more GM tools to generate systems and planets and adventure ideas is helpful, like Stars Without Numbers, or maybe The Perilous Voids, which had a Kickstarter last month, I think. But since Mothership is such a general rule system and setting, what you can really use as inspiration is any sci-fi horror movie that you have watched and any sci-fi book, horror book that you've read, and take that as inspiration for the general setup of your adventure, stat the monster out, and you're ready to go. So yeah, that's the Mothership Sci-Fi RPG. For GMs and players who really like to focus on the atmosphere and the horror and don't want to bother with complicated rules. For now, I bid thee farewell, dreamers. Safe travels, until we shall meet again.